This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. James White entered the Connecticut public school system at age 7. Although he would go on to graduate high school and run a small business, he found himself struggling with reading and writing. He often had to ask friends and family members for help with paperwork. But then he found the Literacy Volunteers of Greater Hartford in 2019 and started taking classes. Many adults like James struggle with reading comprehension and writing, what we might label as literacy skills. But literacy goes beyond reading and writing. There are many areas of literacy today, including media literacy, and we'll talk about that a little later. But first, we'll hear more about adult literacy here in Connecticut. Joining us now is James White. He's a student at the Literacy Volunteers of Greater Hartford. James, welcome to the show today.
Thank you very much.
And also with us is Steve Morris. He's the executive director for the Literacy Volunteers of Greater Hartford. But 10 years before becoming executive director, he was one of the volunteers that made up the LVGH. Steve, thank you for being with us today, too.
Great to be here.
And for our listeners, let us know if you'd like to join the conversation and maybe share your own experiences. Give us a call, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. So, James, I want to start this conversation with you. Can you give our listeners an idea of your story, starting with your high school education?
With my high school education, that definitely was a struggle. At the time I was going to high school, like being to that story about this young lady who graduated from high school and they feel like she didn't really learn anything. I feel the same way. I wish I stood up for myself as a student. If I stood up for myself and said, hey, I'm struggling here, when you going to help me? Don't put me in a program. Don't put me in no special ed, because that gives you a totally different perspective of how school's supposed to be. I wish I had that strength as a young man to stand up for myself.
When did you know you were struggling with reading and writing, and especially with what you just shared, would you have known to stand up for yourself?
As a young child, you got the adults telling you something different. I mean, you really don't have that drive.
Sure.
You know what I'm trying to say? That push to say, wait a minute, something's not right. Why I'm behind? Why the other student is in front of me? What I'm doing wrong? You asking yourself all the questions, but nothing really is answered. Nobody gave you the right answer to help you to go to a different level.
And when did you realize that you were struggling with reading and writing?
Ever since I was in the 4th grade, 5th grade, I put in the special ed program ever since in the 4th grade to high school. And I think that's wrong, because what they're doing, they put you in a different room and shut the door. And they didn't really focus, the main problem. I had to figure that out on my own.
Well, and then talking about figuring out on your own, that seems to be something that you've been working with, because you own a small business that specializes in concrete, and owning a business, I believe, often means a lot of paperwork.
A lot of paperwork. Owning the business, I had to rely on people to help me out. I had to wait on their time to, they have the time to sit down. I had to dictate, what I want to say. Then I said to myself, I can't let this go on because I'm falling behind more and more. I thank God that I found LVGH, and Special Rose, I call her the dean of the school. She really pushed me and continued pushing me. And the rest of the volunteers, Scott Campbell and
Cindy,
and George, I'm very appreciative for what they're doing for us.
Was there a moment that made you realize that you needed to find an actual support system that can help you with what you needed? Like, was there a particular moment, or did it kind of build up and you were just like, I need to change this?
Exactly. I need to change this. I need to find someone of the school or something to really help me to see the same vision I want to see, be in the same place I want to be, and finding the school, find LVGH is a blessing to me. It's because the volunteers and Steve, man, I tell you, I wish I found this 20 years ago.
And how has it changed your life?
It changed my life dramatically. I mean, think about this. I never was a person to take a book. You were there 2 years ago, and in front of a lot of people, and read out of this book. I wasn't that person. No, don't point at me. Don't say, "Oh, I want you to get up there." I'm not going to do it. They took me out of that comfort zone. They gave me that knowledge, that strength, that courage to stand up in front of all the people and read my story.
Well, and then what James is referencing to is I was there to witness James speak in front of a huge crowd of people 2 years ago at an event with the literacy volunteers of Greater Hartford. And I remember thinking, that's amazing, because public speaking is not.
You're right about that.
Well, as you're on live radio, so look at you, James. Oh man, look, there's so much to learn here. And Steve, you've been listening to this conversation and smiling. Anything that James have shared so far that jumped out to you?
I think, first of all, I mean, James is an incredible human being, an incredible guy. But I think he represents so much about our students that come to us. And for those who don't know much about Literacy Volunteers of Greater Hartford, so we are a Hartford-based nonprofit that work with adults learning literacy. Everybody in our programs is 18 and over. And I always am so humbled by the students that we have and just their perseverance. I mean, I said they're over 18. We have students all the way up in their 80s. I'm thinking of a gentleman who started with us when he was in his early 60s, couldn't even spell his own name. Now he's 83 and he's in our advanced level class. So
wow.
I just find it so, a lot of our students have so many reasons not to come to school. Many of them are working multiple jobs, different circumstances, transportation, all this. Yet they find the time to prioritize learning literacy, because literacy, for anybody listening, I mean, you think about it, it's usually your foundation in life. Education is your foundation, and the cornerstone of that is literacy. So I hope that this conversation, not just listening to James, but this conversation in general, I hope it brings awareness to literacy in all forms, but really, in a state like Connecticut that's very wealthy, we have globally recognized higher educational institutions. We have Fortune 500 companies headquartered here. Yet we have literacy is a bigger challenge than I think people want to realize. One quick statistic, 19% of adults here in Greater Hartford are reading at or below the second grade level. That translates to about 200,000 of our friends, our family, our neighbors, our colleagues, our service members, many people that you probably meet on a daily basis. And a lot of times we think, if someone needs to learn English, I mean, okay, that makes sense. But there are a lot of people in a similar situation like James where English is not the problem, it's the reading and writing aspect. So I do think that this conversation is really important because it really impacts us all. A lot of times I think when we see someone struggling, it's, that person should really work on that, or hopefully someone helps that person. But it's a rising tide raises all boats, that if we want a stronger economy, if we want a stronger region for everybody, well, let's make sure that everybody has opportunities to access those resources and access those jobs. And, it all kind of goes together, that if everybody has better skills to take advantage of these opportunities, it benefits us all. And I think sometimes we forget that.
Well, and you mentioned all forms of literacy, which is something that we're definitely going to go deeper into today. But, I think when people think about literacy, it's still sort of limited in this idea that it's reading or reading comprehension or writing. Can you talk about what does literacy in this context really include? Yeah,
I think so. Our approach at Literacy Volunteers of Greater Hartford has always been kind of life skills through literacy. The textbooks that we use, a lot of the classroom materials that we use are, of course, working on those core literacy skills, but it's preparing somebody to go outside and, in situations they're going to interact with in their daily life, whether it's financial literacy, whether it's digital literacy, whether it's career readiness literate, understanding how one finds a job in the process to do that, all those different things. And so I do think that's a great question that a lot of times we look at it just like, oh, let's help someone read a book. And very much that's part of the process as well. But what can you then do with those skills?
Right.
Our goal is to try to make people that call Greater Hartford home, help them access those skills that allow them to be productive members of our society as they please.
Well, I mean, and then the statistic you just shared, it is very eye-opening, 19%, which equates to 200,000 people here just in the Greater Hartford area. So with that in mind, can you give us an idea of how common an experience like James's is?
Yeah, it's more common than I think the casual listener might want to admit, and it's really disappointing. I mean, obviously, James, I'm not going to tell. I mean, he told his story, and I don't want to tell it for him, but clearly had been dealt a pretty difficult hand from his early educational experience, and that really set him on a different course in life. And again, highlighting just the perseverance of our students. James clearly did not let that set him back. I mean, he's a small business owner, a successful small business owner, doing concrete all across the state of Connecticut. His kids have gone on to get master's degrees and all these things. So we see that more often than you would hope. But that's why it's so important that our region has the resources like a literacy volunteers or just other adult ed programs to make sure that, okay, if something happened for whatever reason, and there's never a one size fits all, everybody has a situation unique to themselves, as James has alluded to. But let's make sure that then later on in life they have an opportunity to still move forward with their life by obtaining the skills they need to do what they want to do.
Well, and then on the idea of how common this experience is, James earlier referenced to a story that the Connecticut Mirror reported about a Hartford public high school student who graduated without the ability to read or do basic math or tell time. What was your reaction when you realized that was happening?
Yeah, I mean, first I'll preface it by saying, I don't work in the K through 12 system, so I don't have the the credentials to comment on what happened or didn't happen or the solution. But I think someone who works in adult ed and adult literacy, like I said, it probably wasn't as shocking as it may have been for other folks. And as someone who went through the public school system in the state myself, it's very disappointing. Obviously, we want to make sure that our young people are having the skills to then move on to do what they want to do in life. So, of course, it's very disappointing. But I do hope that the conversation as well, we kind of widen the conversation, look at all the variables. James and I were actually talking about this on the way over, that such a big piece that we don't always think about when we talk about the K through 12 is mom and dad. Do mom and dad at home have the opportunities to go to, in our example, literacy volunteers and make sure that they have the literacy skills to advocate for their child? I mean, most children, their parents are their first teachers. And then as you get older, your parents are like your teacher's aide. And so making sure that mom and dad have the literacy skills to do that, play that role, and then also making sure that, mom and dad have access to job training, because if they have to work 2 or 3 jobs, it changes everything. So our goal at Literacy Volunteers is to make sure that, and a lot of our students are parents of children in the public school system, that helping them gain those skills that allow them to advocate for their child and play a big part in it. And I mean, just one more stat that, the biggest predictor of the future educational success of a child is actually tied to the reading level of their mother. So my takeaway is that if you want to really focus on the K through 12 and have stronger outcomes, well, let's make sure that mom and dad can have strong outcomes too.
Well, and James, it sounds like this did have an impact on you in the line that Steve is sharing here.
100%. And like I want to say is, I believe education is for life. Mm-hmm. Because of that, don't let anyone change your mind. Don't let anyone put you in a different perspective, because education is for life. And having said that, continue pushing, continue trying to get over that hurdle,
And prior to this conversation, we did reach out to the Middletown School District to ask for a statement about James's case, and they did share with us that we are committed to cultivating the brilliance in every student. Our approach to education, including the many types of literacy, is built on a foundation of continuous assessment, data-driven instruction, and nimble responses to student needs. So, Steve, especially with what James just shared and what we've been talking about so far, I think it's hard, like you mentioned earlier too, it's really difficult for a lot of people to understand and grasp how this continues and snowballs. So how does someone go through so many years of education and even graduating high school without learning how to read, which leads to a much needed program like the literacy volunteers.
Yeah, I mean, again, I can't really speak to that too much just because that's
Sure.
not my focus area. But we do see individuals like James and others. I mean, for example, I'm thinking of a gentleman in James's class who had a similar situation where he does have a high school diploma, and then actually joined the United States Navy for 8 years, and then was actually referred to literacy volunteers by the VA because they classified him as someone who's functionally illiterate, and he was probably reading at about a third or fourth grade level, and again having a high school diploma and then even serving the country. So, you think, how did that happen? And I will say, as I said before, it's really unique to the individual.
Right.
Each person that I've met, it's a different set of circumstances, maybe what happened. So I don't know exactly how these things happen, but I do think, someone like James can probably reference, I wouldn't, maybe not the term, but falling through the cracks a little bit, that, once you kind of get behind the 8 ball, it's tough to then get back out of it. And that's why, getting back to my point about there's so many variables in play, whether it's not just the school district, but it's mom and dad at home. And I mean, even where you live, unfortunately in Connecticut, where you live is still a barrier to success when it should not be. In the city of Hartford specifically, I mean, there's people in Hartford, 28% of people are living in poverty in Hartford. The median household income average in Hartford is $37,000, yet you just go across to the western part of Hartford, which now becomes West Hartford, and the median household income average is over 6 figures. So it shouldn't be like that. I mean, you could have a whole show on why that happens, and that we're not here to talk about that today. But point being that there's a lot of variables in play when we talk about these kind of things.
James, do you want to respond to that?
You said it very well, Steve. To be a small business owner, like I told you before, I've been doing concrete for 47 years. Because of that, I had to teach myself in the field how to understand how to read blueprints, how to talk to engineers, architects, superintendents who run in the job, even your employees. You got to put everything in perspective, because people looking at you to complete a job, to have a task. I want this way, that way, and to somebody come to you. I remember one time, this guy is an engineer, and he came to me and said to me, the things you know, the knowledge that you know, I come to you and ask your opinion. Now, that's a great thing for me. Here, this guy went to college, got a degree as an engineer, and he come and ask me for my opinion about certain things. That's just hard, a lot of hard work, a lot of believing in yourself. Don't give up, keep pushing. And as a small business owner, and the people is out there listening to do not give up. Find the resource.
And if I can just kind of piggyback on what James said, I think one of the incredible things for a lot of our students, and especially someone like James, is especially those who are native English speakers. I mean, so we have 2 programs. Our biggest program is for those learning English, but our other program is the one that James is a part of, which we call Basic Literacy. But for those individuals, it's a lot more of a stigma involved with it. I mean, as James has alluded to, it's difficult when you can speak. You have a full conversation with somebody, but then, God forbid, they put a piece of paper in front of you, and you're scared. And a lot of times our students, they come to us having really difficult experiences as young people, and then still living with this kind of weight on their shoulders that, if I walk into a bank and I need to do something, and, they say, hey, can you fill out this form? A lot of our students have kind of built-in excuses of, I didn't bring my glasses today. They don't even wear glasses. But imagine walking out your front door every day with that weight of, what's going to happen if someone asks me to do something that I can't do. And so that's why a lot of times for a lot of students like that are in our basic literacy program, it just getting to our door is hard to come out and tell people I need some help with this. And I think James is such a wonderful representative of our students, and clearly someone who's willing to tell his story. And it's so important to tell people that it's okay. Like when we meet people, sure, we want to know about their past, excuse me, but we also really want to know what their future goals are. Like the person you are before, that's important, but like, where do you want to go? And I think a lot of times when people are struggling with literacy, they don't always get those questions asked. It's just like, they got to just go day to day. But we want to say, what can we help you with that's going to, move you forward in life? And I mean, James is... Yep.
Well, and that's why earlier I was so curious with James, when did you realize you needed help? Because I think oftentimes in these situations, you don't know what questions to ask in order to get through that door, right? And then I cannot imagine the stress that's on you, and that's going to cause other things, right?
A lot of stress. Right. Especially as an artist, my art took me to a lot of places that I can't imagine to even been there. I met Gail King.
James is also an artist, by the
Yes.
way, for
Yeah,
those who
Very
might
good
not
artist.
know.
I done murals on big buildings. I got grants. People gave me grants to do murals. I got invited to colleges, schools to talk to students. I've done a lot of things in my art, but the same token, like Steve said, I have that struggle. Somebody giving you a piece of paper and they say, "Okay, read this." I try not to. I try to shy away from that. You know what I mean? To give me that paper for me to sit there and read just a short story, just a little short story. I remember one time, as a business owner, I had to do a business plan. So I'm with this lady who got a master's degrees in business, and so me and her sitting at the table, and she said, "Okay, read this part and tell me what you think about what I'm doing with your business plan." You know how that feel? Like that said that same story you just said. I didn't bring my glasses, and I don't wear glasses because you get yourself locked into a situation, that you know what you want to say, but somebody giving you a piece of paper to read, that's a totally different story. I want to say to the people who are listening, don't put yourself in that closet. I was in that closet for a long time. LVGH helped me to open that door little by little. And I'm going to continue being at the school. Long that school is there, I'm there.
Well, and Steve, before we go to break, I do want to ask, I think James sort of alluded to there's this idea of stigma as well. And I also want to ask, do you think we're at a time where we're finally realizing that reading and literacy is beyond just that? Because I remember when I was growing up, a lot of adults in my life, both in school and outside of the classroom, sort of dismissed the importance of reading because I think there's this idea that we've kind of taken for granted that we know whatever language that we know. So therefore, there's no need to continue that part of education. Do you think we're sort of at a catalyst time where we're realizing that that's not that simple? And how do we chip away at that kind of stigma and thought process?
Yeah, I think I think we still have some work to do in that area, but I do think more and more, you are seeing a lot more resources come about. And I think when even, for example, workforce readiness, we're seeing it very, we're looking at things in okay, how do we move someone along a certain job training program to get them, and what are the literacy skills they may need to access this opportunity. And so I do think as a region, we are seeing a little bit more of taking even us. I mean, we do certification courses and we try to help people access new opportunities, and then we try to build a course around their needs to help them access those things. And we're not the only ones that are doing that. So I will say, yes, it's happening little by little, but there's a lot more work to be done in that area. And a lot of it gets down to resources and funding.
You've been listening to Steve Morris, who's the Executive Director for Literacy Volunteers at Greater Hartford, and also James White. He's currently a student taking courses there. And they'll both be staying with us. Coming up after the break, we'll explore the many different areas of literacy. Please give us a call if you want to share your experience or just share some thoughts with us, 888-720-9677, or leave us a comment on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. This hour, we're looking at adult literacy here in Connecticut. Still with us is James White. He's a student taking courses at the Literacy Volunteers at Greater Hartford, and also Steve Morris, who's the Executive Director of the Literacy Volunteers of Greater Hartford. So I want to start this conversation actually by having a caller who is calling in from Wallingford, Soraya. You're on the air.
Hi. Thank you, Kat, and thank you and your team to bring up this very important topic. This is really close to my heart, and I want to thank Steve for you, what you do and your colleague as well to do that for people over here. I think we're very lucky to have your organization out there to help people. And kudos to James too to not have that stigma and want to go back and learn. I think it's very important. The fact that you could come out from that, I think it's really, really good for you, and I wish you best of luck. I don't grow up here. I grew up in Thailand, and our learning, our education is different. But what was happening over there, I want people to be able to know what is happening, and we can learn from this story, because every time I think about it, I'm like tearing up. Because me and my sister, she's 18 months younger than me, was in the class, and we were in the school, and she was in the younger class. And because we were so poor, she get to use the same book and the stuff that I handed on to her. And because we grew up in a family that not everybody is in unity, so it's kind of difficult for us, and everyone has to survive in our own way. I was able to get it together myself, but at that point, I was too young to navigate somebody else. And, I love her so much, and I wish that I could do it, but there's nothing that I could do right now. But I want to say to all those educators that is out there, can you please understand what the students have been through, and give them a chance, give them some minutes, a little attention to see, because I don't believe that everyone not have ability to learn, and word is very important. If you use the kind word, I think that would encourage them. My sister was discouraged by the teacher who had me the year prior, and she brought up my case to her and said to her that, you're so stupid. Why are you not as brilliant as your sister? And that was the end of my sister's education. After she was done with sixth grader, she dropped out from school and she just stayed home. And of course, she grew up not being able to read or write, right? And now I'm here, and I'm like, I know that all along, and I'm like, I wish I could help her. I've been here almost 30 years, and she's still over there, so there's not much that we can do. But I mean, I send her love, and we have a talk, and we're close as ever, so every time I go over there, I boost her up. And she takes some education over there sometimes, so now she's okay, can read and write some. But I have to fill her in terms of things that is updated and all those scammers through the internet and things like that over there.
Well,
but meanwhile,
I was going to say thank you so much, Soraya, for sharing your story with us and your sister. And I wish you both the best of luck. And we really appreciate you taking the time and calling us. I mean, that's hard to do, right? On live radio.
Right.
Well, and then, what Soraya just shared, I feel like it's very much in line with what we were talking about earlier, and what we will continue talking about today is her sister having such a hard time in school and perhaps not given a fair chance. Any reactions here? Steve, we'll go with you first.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I appreciate the call as well. It takes a lot to do that. And our philosophy at Literacy Volunteers is really meeting the student where they are. And again, we're talking about adults, and I would say the average age of our students are probably in about the 30s or 30 years old or above. So it's definitely an older student than you might be thinking, someone who just got out of your traditional K through 12 system.
Right.
But it's taking into the whole person as a whole picture in terms of their former education, where they came from, the different things that has happened to them, and then where do they want to go. And it's kind of tailoring the programs to them. And I think that's what we're quite good at LVGH, is really building programs that meet the needs of a low literate adult. It's not a one size fits all, as James can allude to.
That's
Everybody's kind of on their own journey, and so we try really hard to make sure that whether the person is learning English for the first time or whether they are in our basic literacy program, that the program really goes at a pace that we know works for them and has it's not as like, okay, we got to be by chapter 10 by the end of the term. It's really, let's get to where we can be. And as a group, let's see what we need to work on. If today we want to do more grammar or writing, let's do that. And, maybe next week we'll do something different. So, and I think to the caller's point, so many, with better resources, it can really help our whole state. I mean, currently we have about 80,000 job openings, and we see a lot of students at Literacy Volunteers who are learning English, and they could all access jobs if the resources are in place. And so that's another thing that we do. So again, it really takes all of us as a region to not only help everybody access resources, but to build a better Connecticut for all of us.
Well, and I think even with Soraya's story and her sister, and also James, you sharing with us your story, just the three people, we have three completely different stories in terms of literacy. So we have native speaker, non-native speaker, people who have just gotten to the U.S. learning a second or even a third language, which English would be for them. So with that nuance, James will love your reaction to Soraya's story as well.
Okay, I got so many thoughts in my mind.
Maybe one of them.
So just to get back to me, what I was saying, don't give up. Tell your sister, don't give up. Like I said earlier, education is very important. It's for life. Because of that, get out of that comfort zone. Get out of that zone and focus what you need to do as a person, as an individual.
And Steve, right now we're talking about a population which English is a second or third language. So in addition to teaching a basic literacy class, you also work with this population as well. And what does that look like in the greater Hartford area?
Yeah, it's much bigger. Again, similar to just literacy in general. I think people don't realize just how diverse our region is. So for example, last year, amongst all of our programs, not only did we have over 700 students come through our doors, they also represented 50 different countries. And so I think, again, having myself grown up here in this region, until I got to LVJH, I don't think I realized just how diverse, and that makes it a beautiful place, and it's a wonderful place you meet the most interesting people. But as a state, if we're going to welcome people from all corners of the globe, we need to make sure that we have the resources in place for them to be successful. And we try to do that at LVGH, but I will say, and I'm in the nonprofit world, and I'm speaking more for the adult literacy nonprofit sector, funding is always a challenge. We have about the same staffing level, if even actually a little less than we used to about 5-6 years ago, yet our students are growing at a rapid pace. I mean, we have a wait list for some of our classes. And if you don't mind me, I'll make a quick plug for volunteerism. Our name has it in it. And we have some of the best volunteers around. And it's just, it's really unique to meet these people, just as it is the students as well. It's a wonderful, it's education in its purest form, as I say. You have people that want to learn, people like James and our other students, and you have people that want to teach. And it takes 2 hours a week to do it. And with more volunteers, we can have more students and help more students. And then, like I said, make our region better for everybody. And I think our volunteers are really unique in the sense that a lot of times when someone sees a problem, they say, well, someone should really do something about that problem. Our volunteers have kind of deemed themselves, well, I can do something about that problem, and I can help. And I think it's a very unique aspect of our business model, but it's just a really fun place to be in. So if anybody's interested, please check out our website. Yes. We could always use more volunteers.
Well, and I have a fun story with that is my own grandmother, who immigrated from Taiwan about 40 years ago. She went through an adult education literacy program, and now every time I see her, she just quizzes me on all the vocabulary that she learns, and it's been like that for the last 30 plus years.
Well, having started as a volunteer myself, sometimes I would be, and I taught in the ESOL program, right. English program, and people would say, grammatically, why is that? And I said, well, that's just the English language. There's no reason.
I know, it's really hard to explain. And
English language is tough.
Yeah.
I have so much respect for anyone who learns it as a second language, or even third or fourth. Right. And Steve, you just mentioned you have a very unique experience because you did first start out as a volunteer, and now you're the executive director. What do you want our listeners to know about adult literacy?
Well, like I said, I think it's just such an important aspect of everything in our life. I mean, literacy really is the foundation to so much success. And I think that, again, it's something that our region needs to really take a very strong look at if we want to build a better region. Again, I mean, depends on where you live. Like I mentioned, some of the stats about some of the depressing stats about poverty in Hartford and other cities like that. And making sure that we have access, give our residents, everybody, access to resources that will help them move forward in their life. So as it pertains to LVGH, I think it's a wonderful place. Like you said, I started about 10 years ago, and I guess I couldn't get enough of it as I'm still there. But it's just a wonderful place where you meet the most unique people, and that's both the students and the tutors. And I always tell people, if you need your faith in humanity restored, come hang out at LVGH for a little bit.
100%. I was there for 4 years.
Yeah.
This is going to be my 5th year.
Wow.
And you get to meet people like James. I mean, I met James when he first started, and we were doing some of the applications, and I was just so taken aback by everything he's accomplished. And, it's so humbling. Like I said, I've met a lot of people there, and seeing that journey, it's fun to see people succeed. It's fun. And we need more of that. And we get to do that every day at LVGH.
Right, and these stories are so amazing. I feel like I learn so much each time, and now I need to take up oil painting or something. And James, I know you have so many thoughts, but any final thoughts that you want our listeners to take away from this conversation today?
Like I said earlier, I think it's important for people to understand how important it is not to give up. Don't let anyone change your mind. Don't let anyone put you in the closet. Find that drive, find that comfort zone.
Well, thank you so much for that. You've been listening to James White. He's a student taking courses with the Literacy Volunteers of Greater Hartford. Thank you so much, James, for being with us today.
Thank you for being here.
And you were also listening to Steve Morris, who's the executive director for the LVGH. Thank you for being here today.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Coming up this week is National Media Literacy Month. We learn more about that and how artificial intelligence is changing how it's taught. And if you have a question or comment about literacy of any kind, we want to hear from you, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. Today, we're talking all about literacy. Monday marked the start of National Media Literacy Week. The term media literacy might make you think of news, social media, or even, election ads and political messaging. And we're going to talk about all of that. But it's also starting to include a lot more than just those messages, thanks in part to emerging technology like artificial intelligence. Joining us now to talk about all of that is Michelle Chila-Lipkin. She's the executive director of the National Association for Media Literacy Education. Thank you so much, Michelle, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. That was such an amazing conversation that you were having with James and Steve. I'm like, why am I on this? Can we just keep talking?
I know, I'm still riding on that, and you're going to continue driving this train.
So. No pressure.
You got this. We got this. Like James said, don't give up. Believe in ourselves. And that's what we're doing right now. So before we jump into media literacy, and like you said, we just had this amazing conversation with James and Steve from the Literacy Volunteers of Greater Hartford. So is there anything that jumped out to you that you would like to react to? I know you do.
Yeah, there's so much, but there's a few things that I thought were really, really powerful. I was taking notes the whole time. First of all, what James was saying about and your caller kind of reiterated this idea of separation, of being literally and figuratively put somewhere else if you don't have the skills of the students around you, is really poignant and really important to kind of take in. But his constant refrain of don't put yourself in the closet was very inspiring, and I think really, really important. And of course, Steve's work and what they're doing at his organization is so fantastic. But I love what he was saying about parental involvement and just the indication of a child's kind of success does relate to parental skill, and how important it is to make sure we're thinking about the full family skill set. And I think that was really important. I do want to say that one thing that I think was kind of subtly underneath all of this was the idea that our schools are very under-resourced, our teachers are underfunded, and that's a huge problem. And some of this and some of the issues that we see really stem from the fact that the reality is that education is not prioritized in our country. And you can kind of see that in the context of our political conversation right now. When's the last time you really heard either presidential candidate talk about education policy? And so I think that underlying all of this is the fact that we need to prioritize education, and we need to prioritize funding for education and support for teachers so that that our schools are better equipped to address the needs of all students.
Right. And very much in line with that, we've had so many of these conversations, similar conversations where we highlight the fact that you're right. Teachers are short-staffed with more students, as Steve also alluded to earlier, and with more things to cover. I don't know if I've ever really heard of media literacy until, in the recent times in terms of our sort of timeline here. And there's a lot going on in each of the literacy segments, if you will, under the umbrella that we're talking about today. And now with the focus on media literacy in of itself is also a big item under that gigantic umbrella. So can you give us an idea, defined media literacy for us?
Sure. The way that my organization, the National Association for Media Literacy Education, defines media literacy is the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act using all forms of communication. So we really do look at it as an expanded definition of print literacy. And just like print literacy, which requires our understanding in reading and writing and comprehension, media literacy education encompasses like both analysis and expression. And I think that's a really important part of it. But I think as we talk about all the different literacies that exist, like we really see media literacy as obviously an umbrella. I run an organization that focuses on media literacy, so that can't be surprising. But we do need to look at how all of these literacies intersect. And at the base of it all is we're looking at what skills do people need to thrive in the world today, right? And we need all of these skills. And so we need to be working together across literacies to ensure that individuals have all of the skills they need to be successful.
Well, and then on top of that, we also have to talk about social media in this case too. With over a dozen states that are currently suing TikTok, what are your thoughts about these sort of growing calls to regulate these apps? Now, how can media literacy be a part of this conversation?
Well, I think, we focus a lot on media literacy and education interventions that support young people and all people in the skills that they need to just kind of navigate this complicated media ecosystem that we're all swimming in. And so for us, yes, we are definitely feel that there needs to be some regulation, some understanding of how these social platforms work and how they are run and how they make money. And we need to do our best as a society to rein them in a bit. They're very, very powerful. And I think their power took everyone a little bit by surprise. So we're like catching up to it.
Sure.
But I don't think that laws and regulation are going to solve all our problems, right? I think that each individual and our education system needs to address what skills people need. And it's not going away. Like human communication has fundamentally changed in the last 20 years. And our education system has not kept up with that. And it makes a lot of sense. Technology moves really quickly. Education advancements work really slowly. And that's a real conflict, right? And that is really some of the problem there. And so we need to address the gaps in our education to ensure that young people are graduating so they can kind of lead in the future. If they don't get the skills that they need to lead, like we're really failing our kids, right? Like we're failing them. So I think that it's really, really important to kind of look at all of this as a skill set, right? And what are the skills that we need? I think what's really interesting about social media and about conversations we're having about AI is that there's an element of visual literacy that needs to be taken into account. And I think people fundamentally misunderstand that they can look at an image and think they can understand it, right? That you need to actually learn how to read an image. You have to understand how to analyze an image. You need to understand the context of that image. You need to understand the framing, the thinking about what's outside of that image. And those are things that I think we take for granted because I think people who scroll through their social media feeds and they see a lot of video and they see a lot of visual content, they think they kind of understand it. But we need to do a better job in really, really kind of doubling down on this idea that literacy skills are required, whether it's print information, whether it's visual information, video, AI. We need to be able to read and write across all of these media.
Right. And then so reading, that's not just words, it's also pictures.
Yes. We did a session yesterday, our opening session for Media Literacy Week this week was with Thomson Reuters, and we did a whole day with high school students about visual literacy and photojournalism and understanding how photos tell the story and how they capture these moments of history. And we had, Pulitzer Prize winning photographer there. We had the editor of Reuters Pictures. And it was phenomenal to even just get these young people who were literally, like I said, swimming in content and swimming in images to think differently. And one of the students at the end of it said, she's a student journalist. And she said, I always think about how a photo can fit the article. And now I'm realizing that the article needs to fit the photo also, like that there is this connection there. And I think that's really important to remember.
That's not so black and white. They're all very interconnected. And I'm already here. We're going to need an entire different conversation just to dig into every single thing that we just asked. I think each question is garner like an hour of conversation. But adding to that, to the pool or the ocean, actually, of information that we're all kind of swimming in. And like we mentioned earlier, there's so much under the umbrella of media literacy. You also explore literacy around AI, as you just mentioned, also data. Can you tell us what that looks like?
Yeah, so it's interesting because we launched AI literacy initiative recently because one of the things that we really feel the need to do is explore those intersections between different literacies, right? And so figuring out like kind of what is the Venn diagram with media literacy and visual literacy and AI literacy and data literacy, like what are the skills that encompass all of it? And then what are the individual skills that we need with each particular kind of topic? And I think, with data literacy, we as media literacy educators, I don't really talk about it as like differently as you might imagine,
Sure.
Because it is really all about the skills, being, curious, asking the right questions, going through the analysis and evaluation process, learning how to access these tools, to create using these tools, to act using these tools. So if you're focused on like the bigger skill set, the truth is it doesn't necessarily matter if you're looking at something that was AI generated, whether you're looking at a data, a graph, an analysis of some kind, or whether you're looking at kind of an ad in a magazine, right? There's some skill set and some kind of process of thinking critically and expressing your thoughts, your opinions, your evaluation that is consistent, right? But then we have to think differently because like for AI, for example, like the fact that we can generate kind of something out of nothing is kind of a new element, right? And this idea, well, then with that, how do we assess sourcing, right? How do we go back to the source and how do we think about that? With data, it's what I appreciate about data literacy, like it's one of those areas where you can bring into kind of math and science classes that really, really help bring in media literacy skills through those topics.
Well, we already want to take your class on this because I'm never going to look at a picture the same way again. But when we're having fun, time flies very fast. About 20 seconds. What do you hope our listeners get from this today?
Well, I really hope that everyone knows it's Media Literacy Week. I hope they understand the importance of the work that's happening both with adult literacy and media literacy all over the state and all over the country. And I hope people will want to learn more and listen more.
Well, thanks for helping us stay curious. You've been listening to Michelle Chula Lipkin, who's the Executive Director of the National Association for Media Literacy Education. Thank you so much, Michelle, for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Catherine Shen. Today's show is produced by Tess Terrible. Our technical producer is Dylan Reyes. Download Where We Live anytime on your favorite podcast app. Thank you so much for listening, and don't give up.